So when we set out to do this topic, and as I've been working with schools, I personally have a very broad definition of surveys, right? So, and that includes these internal surveys and external surveys. So an internal survey is something that, surveys that are created by your institution. So your IR office may be doing a student survey or faculty surveys, right? So that might be something like, getting feedback on the efficacy of a alcohol control program, or how much people like the dining options, or whatever, right? Any sort of a survey where you're getting these individuals responding, and that could be not just from faculty, it could also be alumni or anyone else. But ultimately, you're collecting that information. You're taking that information and then you're putting it into some repository, some database. That then you do analysis and reporting on that survey data, right, to get results, right? So a lot of people, again, that's driven out of IR groups. So that's what we're calling internal surveys, and I'm using this little logo over here to represent internal surveys as we switch around between them, right? The next one is external surveys, which is surveys that your institution submits to external agencies, right? So this includes things like IPEDS, National Student Clearinghouse Student Tracker, COACHE, which is the like a faculty survey for larger audience, the Common Data Set, NCAA compliance, some sort of consortium submission that you use for benchmarking, right? So that's like, there is a definitional thing that you could talk about. Is that a survey, or is that a data feed or an integration? But things like IPEDS, they call these surveys, right? So this is what we're calling external surveys, and we use this little logo to talk about that. And there are challenges to both of these, but there's also common, like if you can solve a way to govern and understand surveys well, you can apply it to both of these situations and get a value in return in both ways. So as I've defined that, and again, it's broad, and I understand that we probably have people who are approaching this from one way or the other or both. I'm curious, and I'll ask that in a second. I thought the survey was next, but I'm anxious for surveys in my survey session. So let's talk about some more specific types, like some breakdown within that. So the audience, right? You have your individuals or your institutions, and that's sort of what we saw there. And who are the actors? So within the actor, within either one of those, you have your survey creator, right? So this is a person who is defining the survey and sort of creating the survey, right? So, from an internal one that, there may be a group that's doing this, and there's a lot of, science that goes into determining how, how to pose your questions and what to gather and what's statistically significant and all those types of things. But the designing of the survey and creating it as a thing that people enter. And then there is the submitters, right? So it's either students submitting to you or you submitting to National Student Clearinghouse or whatever. And then the recipients, right? So now that data, you've collected that data, and now you're pulling that into some place to do your analysis. So it's creators, submitters, and recipients. The types of submission, right? So you might be getting sort of summary data, right? Which is, IPEDS has these things where it's asking you sort of what is your, total FTE, or other sort of information that's just sort of a single response or aggregate or calculated information at a summary level, or raw data where you're sending sort of unit information up to people, like Student Tracker. Here's all of my enrollments and my graduates, right? Raw data is when people start thinking a little bit less around calling them surveys, and they call them more like data feeds or something like that, but it's sorting similar results. So those are the two different types of sort of survey submissions. And then the methods of submission, again, this applies across each of the different types, but you might be submitting a file or a CSV or something, or a spreadsheet with your responses. And again, sort of IPEDS takes those things, and Student Tracker takes those. Or maybe there's a form, you're either filling out a web form, or there's an actual paper form that you're filling out, or a web service that you're posting to, or someone's posting to you, or even verbal, right? So someone's giving you a verbal response, and you're taking that sort of summary or qualitative answer verbally. Or you're using the survey tools, like a SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, I think, that my team brought up to me the other day. So a bunch of survey tools that people use to do mainly those individual surveys, but could be larger things. So this is the different methods and different types of surveys.